Hello, everybody. Welcome. If you are from Stavanger, that yellow disc in the sky is called the sun. Not many of us have seen it here before, but a wonderful day in Stavanger. And welcome on behalf of the British Embassy. My name is Richard Wood. I'm the British Ambassador. Also on behalf of the British Norwegian Chamber of Commerce and BI Handelshøyskolen. It's really great to be back in Stavanger and at ONS. Gratulerer ordfører and Leif Johan for putting on such a wonderful show. My first ONS was 2018, 4 years ago, and then the talk was about recovery after record low prices. Do you remember that? How times change. And this time, I think we're all talking about trust, which is a very apt concept in the current times we live in, with cost of living crises, energy security crises, and record high prices. Now, there are hundreds of events in and around ONS. What we wanted to focus on at this event is specifically on the fact that the future of energy is international, not national. Why? Well, because we need collectively to ensure rapid reliance on Russian energy to stop Putin using energy as a weapon against Europe, as President Zelensky challenged us to do this morning. Also because we must not lose sight of climate goals, and we have to accelerate the decarbonization of our economies. And finally, I would suggest because we must continue to look at economic growth, which will mean exponential growth in demand for energy. So these are the next great energy challenges, and this event is to remind us that it was the UK and Norway who have worked most closely together to create the great oil and gas adventure that we had. That has made the North Sea the most technologically advanced and cleanest supplier of hydrocarbons in the world. And we believe that it can and now must be the UK and Norway who work together on the new energy adventures. Accelerated build-out of offshore wind, carbon capture and storage in the North Sea, integrated electricity grids, production of a ready supply of hydrogen for shipping and industrial use. On all these things, we have natural synergies, overlapping interests, and a unique expertise and capability. And our two prime ministers, in fact, signed a joint declaration in May, committing us to deepen and broaden our cooperation on energy. How do we do that? Well, His Royal Highness the Crown Prince is going next week, the week after, to Aberdeen and London to begin the journey with many of the Norwegian businesses here to find out how we do that together. Sharing experience and building partnerships for innovation and opportunity, I think, are absolutely key. And we are happy to share our experience on building out the world's biggest offshore wind industry outside China. And we're very keen to partner on carbon capture and storage and taking hydrogen technology to market scale with you. We've assembled a great panel for you here tonight, a mix of businesses and politicians that can make all of this happen, and they're going to give you the key. And thanks again to our partners BNCC and BI, as well as to my fantastic team from the Embassy, and to our sponsors, Arca Solutions and BP. So now with that, I will hand over to one of our partners, the president at BI Handelshøyskole, Karen Spence. Takk for meg.
So a warm welcome and good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us here at MS Brim, and thank you, Your Excellency, for the nice introduction. So for me, as the new president of BI Norwegian Business School, I actually assumed the position. I've been here for 3 weeks, 1st of August. It's great to be, first of all, of course, here in Stavanger, but also with all of you here at ONS. It is my first visit to this conference, but I can tell you from what I've seen and heard so far, it will definitely not be my last one. I think that because I think maintaining a close collaboration with the world of business is actually a very key priority for BI. It's a great benefit for our students. It's for, of course, for our research. And not to forget, I think it ensures that everything we do within our institution has a real and positive impact both on business and on society. And that's also the reason why BI is here today, as an academic partner of the ONS conference, to support arenas and, of course, collaborations seeking to co-create a more sustainable future. And I'm proud and grateful for our collaboration with the British Norwegian Chamber of Commerce and the British Embassy in Oslo. And we're also, of course, thankful for the partnership with Aker and BP. And as we heard for tonight, we have a wonderful and highly competent panel to discuss something very close to where we're standing right now, the North Sea. And more specifically, of course, as already mentioned by the ambassador, that our two countries' experiences work together towards a shared goal to make the clean energy revolution happen. I think we can all agree that mutually rewarding collaboration between academia and industry is vital for us and society in order to secure a successful energy transition. With that said, I'm really looking forward to an interesting discussion here tonight. And I'm also glad to introduce the moderator who will be leading us through this exciting panel discussion. He is the chairman of the British Norwegian Chamber of Commerce and a partner and senior advisor in the leading Norwegian advisory firm First House. Håkan Borud, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm not going to say much about the Chamber other than that we're part of a global network of 90,000 companies. And if you want to find out how you can unlock that network to the best of your business, please talk to our business manager, Nina, or me after the event, and we'll help you do that.
Hello.
So now over to why we're really here, and that's to talk to our skilled panel as to find out how we can drive the North Sea clean energy revolution together. Emphasis on together. So I'm going to introduce the panel, and then you can just, well, you're already there, but if you can get closer. Sunniva Bjørnstad, Senior Partner and Responsible Offshore Wind at High-Tech Vision. Raise your hand, please. Thank you. And then we have Jon at Head of Floating Wind and Policy of Offshore Wind Development at BICE, which is the Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. Raise your hand, please. And Marte Mokstad, EVP Engineering, Aker Solutions. Yes. Matt Hind, Head of EU Affairs, National Grid. And Michael Dennison, Senior International Advisor at BP. And Nikolai Astrup, which we all know, I think, in Norway, but he's here from the Conservative Party and is on the Energy Committee in the Parliament. So this is how it goes. We have 30 minutes, so they have to speak fast. And after 30 minutes, we're going to have a small chat between the Ambassador Wood and Hilde Tonne, CEO of Statnett. And then it's going to be rounded up by Odd Harald Berg-Vasen, Adjunct Executive in Residence at BI Business School, and Dr. Juris at Arntzen de Besche. By that time, it will be 6 o'clock, we hope, and you will still have plenty of time to drink, socialize, find new friends, find new business partner, and find out how we can collaborate to really make the North Sea work for the best of all of us. Okay, so I'm just going to jump into it. We all know the challenges, we all know the problems. What we need to discuss here today is what are the opportunities. And Michael, I'm going to start with you, and I'm on first name basis. We all are on this boat. Because you have told me that you actually think you have the secret as to why Norway and the UK will succeed in the North Sea.
What's the secret? I think the secret lies in our long history of working together on energy. And looking into this, I'm a historian by background. I came to understand that the UK and Norway have worked together on energy issues for really since the beginning of the 20th century. On coal, the UK was really the biggest coal supplier into Norway in the first 50 years of the century, 20th century. And then after that, of course, oil and gas was produced. And we agreed on splitting the boundary pretty easily. We agreed on a unitization methodology. in the 70s, the Frigg Field Agreement, which has been used by many different countries after that as a model agreement. Norway looked at the UK's experience of electricity market liberalisation in the 1980s. And then now we're doing new energy together. And I think the secret as to why we've done so well is because we're both pragmatic nations. We get on with it. We're problem solvers. We don't bear grudges when we do have a disagreement where we believe in the rule of law. And we've settled some disagreements over energy and fisheries, for example, through international judicial mechanisms. So what we do is we share values, we share a common heritage in terms of developing our energy sectors together. BP, for example, has been in Norway since 1912. There are many other companies who we work with, we've worked with over the past century. Currently, we're with two great Norwegian companies, Aker and Statkraft, on the Sørlige Nordsjø bid. And we found that that partnership has really gelled and really worked well. So I think that's the secret, being pragmatic, being solution-focused, and sharing the same values, same corporate values.
Same values, we don't bear grudges. Let's see. Well, maybe we'll find out today. Jon, I spoke to you earlier, and of course, the UK ambitions or the speed is quicker than the Norwegian speed when it comes to building out offshore wind. How do you think and work and strategize around offshore wind at BICE?
Well, I think it's important to recognise that we've achieved a lot in offshore wind already. And Norwegian companies have actually played a significant role in that. So Equinor at the moment are building what will become the world's largest wind farm out at the Dogger Bank. We've had companies like Statkraft and Aker as well playing extremely important roles, and they'll continue to do so, particularly as we transition to new technologies such as floating offshore wind, where, for example, subsea expertise, where there's a lot of expertise in Norway, will actually become extremely important. But when we're thinking about how we expand offshore wind, we're always thinking about how do we make it actually attractive to international investors, because we rely on finance from all around the world. We think about how do we set the right framework to attract investment, to bring confidence into the sector, and how do we actually work best in partnership with industry to actually drive it forward, because everything that we've done in the UK has been around partnership through mechanisms like the Offshore Wind Industry Council, through things that we've done like cost reduction task forces, and now we have an offshore wind acceleration task force which is working with us to actually try to reach the 50 gigawatts by 2030, including 5 gigawatts of floating wind. And that sort of partnership working is going to be absolutely vital as we develop out the North Sea.
Thank you very much. Marta, do you agree with this? Do we have the same culture? Do we have the same values? Do we have no grudges?
Very many different questions, so maybe not the yes or no, but first of all, I and Aker Solutions, we've been working a long time with BP and based on a technology project now, so I think that's a really good starting point. And when it comes to how to succeed, I agree, but I think also to really collaborate is the main challenge. And then I'm thinking not just across borders, but also governments, industry players, and working across the value chain. And I'm from an organization where we have strong units, both in UK and Norway, and we have really good working relations. Aberdeen, Stavanger, long traditions, both in the company and industry. But I don't think we should think that there is not some elements of not invented here. I think we see that all the time. So how can we really ensure that we learn? I think from the UK, lots to learn on the regulatory side, the push, the support on the political side, willingness to invest in infrastructure. But how are we able to build on that? And maybe one key topic is really how do we solve the bottlenecks in the transmission and grid in the North Sea. That is really a big joint effort as I see it. And then I know I can't speak for a long time, but if I could add one aspect, I think what we really also have to do from start is to develop common standards. And that is an industry topic. It's a supplier topic, as I represent, because we can't do as we did in the oil and gas industry, start that as late as we did, then we won't be able to industrialize, standardize, and drive down cost.
All right, so you pointed at the problems and the challenges. Let's try and dive into how we can actually solve these problems and challenges. I know I've given you the easy task, and all the other ones here are going to get the difficult ones. So, Sunniva, let's go to you. How can we solve this? How can we make this framework? How can we collaborate deeper, closer? She's pointing out many problems, but what's the answer?
Yeah, thank you for that. Great intro. No, I think for Norwegians in particular, it's really getting started. That's the main challenge and the solution also, to get those two areas out for award. Then we can get started.
When you say the two areas, then you...
Yeah, so sorry, Sørlige Nordsjø 2 in the southern part of the North Sea,
yeah,
and Utsira Nord a bit further north, floating offshore wind. When they become available to apply for and someone is actually awarded that acreage at some point, then we can also get started, and then it will be easier at that point also to discuss further with the UK side. But I think in a bit aside from that, there's also other areas where we can cooperate, maybe on electrification of the sector. Both the oil and gas platforms on the NCS or the Norwegian continental shelf side and the UK side, they lie actually very closely to one another in geography. So there's something we could do there, also using offshore wind maybe as the energy source directly into that. So that's maybe one specific point. And on the supply chain side, I think there's many cooperations going on already. And it's important, of course, to we can't just sit and wait for those areas in Norway to become available. So we need to start. And I think the supply chain in Norway has done that. And also the developers in Norway working on sites abroad, such as you mentioned Dogger Bank, which we, High-Tech Vision, through our joint-owned company with ENI called Vårgrønn, recently signed an agreement to acquire 20% of Dogger Bank, which is yet to be closed in September or so. But that's also something that we're doing because we can't sit and wait. So we need to go out and about and gather experiences to also participate better in cooperation going forward.
I have a feeling that Nikolai Astrup might get into interconnectors and electrification. So let's wait a little bit with that. But you talked to me earlier about CFDs as an instrument and mechanism. Tell me why it is so important. Actually, we might not know what it is, all of us. Tell us what it is and why it is so important.
Yeah, so the CFD stands for Contract for Difference. It's really a strike price. It's a type of subsidy that the government in the UK has used with a lot of success in our view. And also one of the kind of enabling factors for us to actually invest in Dogger Bank is this CFD structure, which kind of locks in the price for 15 years, making the commercial model very easy to understand, predictable for the supply chain, but also for banks and investors. So it's something that can be funded through this structure. In Norway, there's a debate going on what type of subsidies should we apply, if any. And of course, the CFD structure that has been used in the UK has worked really well. And I think maybe the most beneficial part of it is that it takes into consideration the competition in the market at the point where it's actually awarded, because it's an element there of competition to get a CFD, so that the CFD will never really be too high, because it takes into account all of the competing parties. So, for instance, now the latest CFD awarded this summer was 37.5 pounds per megawatt hour. And that is, of course, as most of us know, really a lot lower than the market price. So it's maybe not really a subsidy anymore. It's more like a fixed price contract. And it's up to the developer if they want to kind of go into that or not. But as a system, it's really worked while the industry kind of stabilizes. And I think we will see these very strict borders kind of loosen up over time, so that financing and CFD is not necessarily linked one-to-one going forward. You can maybe get financing more on merchant exposure, where you're totally linked to the spot price in the market. And that's also a task for us as investors and also banks to be able to participate in that side of the transition as well.
Yeah, sure.
And just to pick up on the CFD as well, because wholesale prices are so high, there are a lot of CFD holders who are now actually paying back money to the government. So it's actually helping consumer bills in the UK. And when we were developing the CFD, we took a lot of feedback from the market because it had to work not just for developers, but also for investors as well. So just to give an example, one of the things that investors told us they were concerned about was political risk. So you sign a contract, a government then later down the line, for whatever reason, decides they want to revisit that. So our CFD is a private law contract. The counterparty is a private company that's owned by the government. But if there is ever a legal dispute, you just go to law in the same way that you would with any other commercial counterparty. So there was a case where a developer wanted to claim force majeure under the contract. The counterparty didn't agree. They went to arbitration, and it was sorted out that way without any involvement from the government at all. And it's that sort of thing where we try to engender confidence from investors from all around the world.
So hands off government.
To a degree.
Yeah. That must sound really good to you, Nikolai. Should dream come true, this.
Well, I think governments need to be involved, sadly. I think actually it's exceptionally important that governments create a predictable framework for both the developers and the investors and everybody else involved. If we are to achieve our ambitions, which we of course are, and we need to think big, I think that's important, and act fast. And that requires political will. Unfortunately, political will is a renewable resource, so you never know, it might happen.
Remember that, everybody.
I teased the ambassador when we were in Arendal, and I said, yes, it's true, the UK has a head start on offshore wind, but so did Scott in the race to the South Pole, and Amundsen won. But actually, I have to say,
no grudges.
Grudges. That was teasing because it's actually about collaboration. The North Sea Basin is something we share. We can't develop it by ourselves. We need to develop it together. And planning an offshore or a grid in the North Sea that's sensible is something that we have to do together. We can't do it the UK by itself, Norway by itself, and then the Danes and the EU and the Germans and even the Belgians with 65 kilometers of coastline are part of another initiative. So we need to actually see this as one. And I think the UK and Norway needs to work together to be a part of the whole European approach to the North Sea. This is the best wind resources in Europe by far. We also have a potential of storing 150 billion tons of CO2 combined, which is unique and is going to be necessary. And we need to look at all this infrastructure together. Pipelines, what do we need? What do we need in terms of interconnectors and hybrid interconnectors, which I'm all for, if anybody were in doubt. So close cooperation is definitely going to be important, and especially now, this message is important. Because right now, more and more people are saying, yes, we need to fend for ourselves, and we don't care about our neighbors. This is not the time to fend for ourselves. This is the time to work together on all these issues, otherwise it's not going to work out.
Okay, so you're going to get a difficult task now, because the political parties of the government didn't want to be here for some reason. So we'll have to ask you, why don't we speed up in Norway? What are we doing wrong?
Well, firstly, I have to remind you that the world's biggest floating offshore wind farm is now being built here in Norway. So we're not that far behind. And to be honest, we need to act faster in the future. And concession times need to go down, and we need to plan ahead. That's for sure. But right now there are other obstacles as well. I mean, the value chains are global for most of the inputs for this industry. So that will be a bottleneck, because the EU is going to invest a lot, the US is investing a lot, Asia is investing a lot. There is also going to be a fight for talent, and we need to build the whole value chain in our separate countries, but with an eye to what our neighbors are doing, so that we can combine the best of our talent and pull it together. I think the most important thing is predictability in terms of area. We need to be coming up with new acreage at a steady pace and a predictable pace, predictable sizes. We need to get ahead on planning the North Sea grid and making sure that all those actors who are going to invest billions in creating this value chain know what they expect. And then we can really get up to pace. Fortunately, the future is not linear, it's exponential. So this is going to really take off. That's my prediction.
Marte, yes. Good.
Yes, a bit building on the speed aspect, because I think we seem fairly aligned on what we talk about here. But I think there is another aspect to that. And yes, we have started. We as Aker Solutions involved in this incredible project. But it is really urgent, because what's happening now in Norway is the tax back project or activity back projects. And if we are to avoid a gap in activity, they're ending around 2027. And for engineers, main workload is even earlier. So we will have to speed up if we're going to be able to transition. So that is another concern. But then again, I think this collaboration that we are allowed as Norwegian industry also to be part of these international projects, because developing a Norwegian industry, it's not interesting in itself. We have to be competitive internationally. But being strong at the home base, that's a really good starting point.
I agree completely. I'll bring it on to the government.
Oh, we could start another debate now. I can feel it, but we're not going to do that. But Marte, as you know, the UK, they like auctions. You don't like auctions. You don't want auctions. Why not?
In general, or offshore wind, I assume? No.
In general, I don't know, but offshore wind, I do know.
No, I think it's really not a given that the company that wants to pay the most for a license is the best to develop the industry longer term. So therefore, I think a process where you have a discretionary process system, where you have qualitative criteria, then it's more up to the government to decide on which companies they believe in. And just to exemplify that, I think if you look at Norway, we definitely need some step changes in technology to realize these full-scale floating offshore wind farms. And how do we do that? Well, we need to do it through the licensing rounds and the projects. And then qualitative criteria is a means to actually select the right companies to drive that.
Sorry, just very quick, if this one is working. So it's just keeping our eye a bit on the history as well in the UK. So we said that the UK kind of like the auction model. And of course, we know that the last awards on the UK has been extremely competitively priced. But that was UK round number 4. UK round number 1, 2, and 3 were really without any form of auction fee. So that in those processes, the acreage was handed out by the government for free to the developers. So they started off really differently than what we're discussing in Norway now. So we're kind of jumping into the UK current position without reflecting where the UK actually started in their journey.
I think I'll come. Did you want to say something?
Just that there are so many variables to actually put into the mix here. We've talked about pace being really important. It's a race against the clock. We've got to really, for the climate issue, but also to get the industry get the industry moving. So we have a platform for regional integration. We haven't mentioned the EU yet. I'm sure Matt will perhaps at some point, but that is a really important dimension to build out the grid in the North Sea. We've got the UK is not a member of the North Sea Economic Cooperation Group. I hope that we do become one, because it's rather strange to have 8-9 countries working out what the grid will look like in 20 years' time without the UK there. So we really want the UK to be in that. But there are many variables. There's pace, but there's also coordination. So the UK model was to build quickly, but as Ofgem and BEIS are working through at the moment, there needs to be coordination. And you also need to bring along the communities who are impacted, the coastal communities, and this is where the qualitative element might be a factor as well. So you've got to build the industry, bring get a social license to operate, bring people with you, as well as moving fast. So these are all different variables that have to be balanced out by policymakers and regulators.
Matt, you're a very patient man.
Not a problem.
But you told me before that one key to success here is transparency. So please be a bit transparent when I ask you, what can we learn from the UK, and what mistakes have you made that we shouldn't do?
Okay, so what can you learn from the UK? I mean, for me, the biggest thing the UK did, and I was previously in the government before I joined National Grid, it was having firm targets. And everybody in the sector has known there have been legally binding targets since 2008. And I'll be slightly heretical with the ambassador and a colleague from BASE here. Those came from Europe. So actually having binding renewables targets was exceptionally useful at the early stages of this. Now that was taken over by the UK's Climate Change Act. So as an industry, we knew we had to do this. And to be fair, the EU targets are now irrelevant because we have got domestic targets in that context, and also we're not in Europe. But I think that's why it really jumped off. And then CFDs. CFDs, I was in the Department for Energy when they were developed. They were quite an innovative approach. And looked at from an industry perspective, the level of revenue certainty was really a positive. So I think that those are the two things that really made a difference. In terms of mistakes, well, if I was being controversial, I'd say writing off onshore wind as a potential solution is not a great move forwards. But on the other hand, that has had an impact in the UK where, to be perfectly honest, the only thing you can build is offshore wind. So the entire direction of investment has gone into offshore wind, and it's been vastly successful. And obviously the next stage for us is the development of a grid, and I have to kind of note, the longest subsea interconnector in the world is the one we built with our partners in Statnett, North Sea Link. And as we move into the next stage of that with multi-purpose interconnectors, I think the key challenge for us is finding, and I'll pick up on Mike's point, we've got to find a way to do compatible regulation between us and Norway, but also in the EU. And I mean, you guys are in the European Economic Area, so we face the similar challenges on this. So that's the big challenge going forwards, I think, to maintain a level of regulatory certainty and transparency of what we're dealing with as an industry, so we can actually meet these targets.
I heard you almost started a debate about Brexit here. I'm not going to go there.
That was not my intention.
But you do realize powerful people in Norway don't want interconnectors. What do you think about, have you followed that discussion at all, and what do you think about it?
Yes, absolutely. I think, as has previously been said, we are in a particularly difficult time at the moment that was not perhaps foreseen by a lot of people. I think I would agree with what the Danish, Finnish, and Swedish transmission system operators said last week. The best way of ensuring security of supply is to maintain open borders. Now, I understand that people in southern Norway are really feeling the effects of high electricity prices, but I think I'd agree with the director of the Norwegian regulator, who said that actually security of supply might be a legitimate issue to make decisions on that basis, but prices aren't. And I think my personal reflection on this would be, and I'm not saying this towards Norway, I'm saying this towards anyone who's involved in cross-border trade. A decision made on day one of a situation might look good domestically, but you don't know it's going to be the right decision on day 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, or 50 when the decisions that result from that decision to move away from markets come back to haunt you. So, as I say, I would agree with the other TSOs that maintaining open borders is the key thing.
Be friendly. So, Nikolai, in 2025, 2026, Norway might be, or probably will be, a net importer of power, and in 2030, UK will be a net exporter. Interconnectors, is it a no-brainer, or?
There is definitely a hot debate on interconnectors, and I think it's crucial that we have interconnectors because Norway has an extremely weather-prone energy system or electricity system today. where the difference between a dry spell and a wet year is as much as 60 terawatt hours. So it just means that for our own security of supply, it's beneficial to have interconnectors. And in most years, we will have an excess to share. For instance, in 2020, we had 15 terawatt hours just being poured out to the sea without being produced because it was too wet and prices were too low, so we didn't have enough capacity to be able to get rid of it. But this is a very difficult question. In the long run, there is no doubt that there's going to be so much energy in the North Sea area and in our neighboring countries. But it's going to be based a lot on unregulated power, so it will be beneficial to all to have interconnectors to be able to make the most of the energy sources that we have spent billions developing in the next decade to come. And come to offshore wind power, if Norway is to build 30, 40, 50 gigawatts of offshore wind, we need to share it with somebody, because we're not going to be able to use it all by ourselves. So we need to be thinking ahead and looking at this as one integrated system. And I sometimes remind people that the UK has an ambition of becoming a net exporter of renewable energy in 2030 already. So they might not reach that target, but at least we know that their ambitions are very high and they're working towards it. And if you look at our other neighboring countries, Sweden, there's 126 gigawatts of applications for wind power in Sweden alone. Now, not all of that is going to be built, but it says something about where they're heading. And the Danes, we know that they have their energy islands. And until 2026, there will be 40 terawatt hours of new renewable energy coming into the Nordic countries alone. And that matches the increase in demand exactly. So
I'll stop you there.
I'm not that worried, actually. But you started this long debate, so you had to hear me out.
My mistake. I'll never do it again. Matt.
I mean, actually, you've just said exactly what I wanted to say as well. I completely agree with everything you've said. By 2030, the UK will be exporting vast amounts. At the moment, our peak demand is 53 gigawatts. If we've built 50 gigawatts of offshore wind, there will be periods of time when you're producing almost 50 gigawatts. What are you going to do with that? Maybe green hydrogen in the future. Maybe. But even that, that's quite a long way away. And it just makes me reflect. I worked for Tony Blair in 2008 when the initial 2020 targets were set at an EU level. And the discussions we had around setting that renewable energy target, it was always on the basis that if you have deep penetration of variable generation renewables, you have to have interconnection. It's the only way it makes sense. So I think nothing has changed that fundamental calculation, I think.
So if you work for Tony Blair, you should talk to Nicola Astrup. You'll have an interesting beer.
I was a civil servant.
I quite like Tony Blair, so he did a lot of good things in government.
Yeah.
I think the same point applies to the other European countries as well, because the Danes, the Dutch, the Belgians and the Germans have talked about 65 gigawatts by 2030 and 150 by 2050. So the same point applies that there are going to be significant periods where there's excess power and it's actually very, very cheap and it's got to go somewhere. So greater interconnection just becomes more logical in that sort of scenario.
All right. I'm going to try to land now. So we export and import football players. We should be able to do this because football players are difficult. I haven't heard anything that we really, really disagree on, except maybe auctions. We can come back to that in another debate. I'm glad I don't have to sum this up. Sorry?
The South Pole.
And the South Pole, yeah. Well, we can't disagree on the South Pole. So the next, thank you very much for the panel. You'll hang around, I hope, so that people can have a talk to you if they want to, ask questions, have ideas. If you have anything that you think can bring this collaboration forward, these are powerful people, guys. Okay, next up is actually a tete-a-tete between Richard Wood and Hilde Tonne, CEO of Statnett. Is she late? She's 5 minutes late. Well, then we'll actually change it. If Where is Odd Harald? Can you sum up this discussion, you think, or is it too early for you?
No, I'm happy to.
Okay, so then we'll switch. You'll sum up this discussion. Glad I don't have to. And after that, we'll have the talk between you and Tone. Okay?
Thank you very much. Thank you for a highly educating debate. I mean, it's a lot to learn, a lot to take away, even at detail levels, and not only the high level stuff. So I think it was very, very valuable. I'll start off with the ambassador highlighting trust, maybe as a challenge, which is very important here. And cooperation. Those are the two key issues that I took away. As a commercial lawyer, I've always taken pride in having assisted Statnett in developing the NordNed to the Netherlands, the NordLink to Germany, and the North Sea Link to the UK. Now I've been challenged on my approach to that. Are you taking pride in that? Aren't you to blame, dude? Well, I'm still proud. I think interconnection and the togetherness is important, and increasingly so. And I'm very glad to sort of digest that as a key takeaway from the debate as well. I mean, we all know the challenges, both on the ground and geopolitically, and also with. I mean, we didn't touch much on Brexit here today. Brexit is a fact of life, and the EEA agreement creates its own challenges as well. But the Norway and the UK do have a very comprehensive free trade agreement. There is also a detailed agreement on power exchange, created and signed by Mr. Ambassador, which focuses mainly on the use and utilization of North Sea Link, sorry, but it opens up. So I think there are perspectives there already for a deeper cooperation in the field of energy. So point is, we do have legal tools at hand. I mean, lawyers are always focusing on the challenges and the problems, but there is a legal toolbox here already. So I think solutions, as we heard from the panel, get busy, start working. And I think also from what I heard today, the domestic challenges to get busy applies equally here. I mean, I think if we resolve the Norwegian political climate and get busy in the national policies, then everything is ready for this. There are bottlenecks in Norway, but they are resolvable, and I think now that most people want to get busy. Nothing on the panel to the contrary, although impatience is healthy in this respect. So we can cooperate on the current basis between the two nations. Second thing, there is a lot to learn. Of course, CFDs. I mean, get busy once again. Norway should be making money on CFDs rather than paying out on the electricity certificates. So why don't we? There's a lot to learn. I also took away from the base representative, make regulation attractive. That's important. And I think you can even tailor CFDs and auction mechanisms in a predictable and attractive manner. So, still no Statnett CEO, so I can still talk a little bit, but I will go quick. I think the togetherness is the important thing. I mean, we have a lot to learn, and we should be humble about that from the Norwegian side. I mean, the UK has really succeeded in a lot of elements here. But it takes two to tango at the same time, and the togetherness is important here. And one thing is Brexit. We also saw the cooperation initiative between Denmark, Germany, the Netherlands, and Belgium. That is a challenge in itself because it causes problems. You have two sort of outside countries for different reasons, but we share the same goal and the same need for a coordinated approach in the North Sea. So we can't go alone. We can hardly go together, only UK and Norway either. We need to coordinate this and at least make sure that we don't work in an opposing direction from what is going on in the rest of Europe. You can't coordinate everything, then nothing will ever happen. So get busy again, but I mean, we need to try to coordinate that, and I think it's very, very important to do this together. So if I may land then, what I took away is we have huge possibilities for working together, for creating business, which is what you're here for, and not to listen to me, so I'll land. Both in the supply chain industry, in the infrastructure industry, and also in the power production and power exchange industry as such. So I think key takeaway, togetherness. I look forward to what's coming up.
Thanks very much. The B word has been mentioned a few times. I mean, I rarely talk about Brexit for obvious reasons, but also because in the field of energy, we haven't really noticed any effect of that at all. I mean, what we are, it's true, not in North Sea cooperation, but I very much hope, the UK very much hopes to be a part of that at some point in the future, simply because that is the practical way forward for all of us. So we are cooperating with Europe on a practical basis, on an ideological basis on energy. I like to say that we have higher targets on climate than the EU does, but we still talk all the time about what is achievable together, and that it will be exactly the same as the solutions on energy. I will tell you if you don't pass it on. I got in a bit of a trouble with the Danish government when I was asked by a journalist after the Esbjerg agreement, are you concerned about the UK not being included? And I said, no, I'm not concerned about not being included. In the long term, it absolutely doesn't make any sense for these grids not to be interconnected all around the North Sea. But if they want to talk about how to install 150 gigawatts of power and to start that process of connecting grids to each other, that's absolutely fine. That's fantastic, in fact. But it doesn't make any sense in the long term for the UK and Norway not to be a part of that. The idea behind an interconnected grid in the North Sea is that we make most efficient and effective use of all the power that is available and being generated. And the one thing from the debate in Norway that is often forgotten is that it is connection to the outside, to the neighbours, that has helped to keep prices historically low in Norway. So in fact, that is going to do the same in the long run if we have interconnected grids. It's also going to help us with decarbonising the offshore sector and many other things. So I don't mind that the countries are having preliminary talks about where we go, because in the end we will all be part of that system. Goodness, I'm getting all kinds of signals. This is worse than the protocol of when a member of the royal family arrives. But I should explain that this is absolutely not Hilda's fault. She could have come in the front door. I don't know why we're taking her around the back. She's here. Actually, she's been in talks with the Prime Minister and the Prime Minister of Belgium. So it's actually really important, and it's about the same stuff that we are talking about. So maybe she's got some news for us. Hello.
Gracious, now I get very nervous.
We weren't talking about you or anything. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. And I was just explaining that you've actually been in a meeting with the Prime Minister of Belgium and the Norwegian Prime Minister.
Yep.
So.
And how did that go?
What did they say? Were they talking interconnected grids and joining up the UK as well?
I actually mentioned UK.
Thank you.
I did. You'll be happy with me. No, I mean, the whole session was 30 minutes, very efficient, but it was a very good meeting between two nations that are both part of Europe in different ways, but still part of Europe. And when we talk about Europe and Europe's challenges currently, we have to talk about offshore wind. And of course, with Chris Peters, who's from Elia Group, and myself from Statnett, and also Christian Rønning Tønnesen from Statkraft, we are more than maybe normal interested in offshore wind and offshore grid and the development that could be ahead of us. And I think we all have to remember that the North Sea development with offshore wind may become really a basis for the renewable net zero Europe in 2050. We need more production, as we do in Norway, quicker than we can do offshore wind, but still. And Europe needs more production and more power generation. And in order to get that power generation offshore, we need a grid. So my message and our message was that we will develop this, Statnett being responsible for planning and architecture currently, along the coast, and with radials, the famous radials, going into Norway, and having direct industrial development along the coast, which is only natural with floating wind. And then, of course, we're also starting looking at multi-purpose interconnectors, which is another word for hybrider. And that is also something that we put forward. We discussed that on a technical basis with UK. We discuss it with and work with it with Denmark. And we will do the same with Belgium. And we'll probably do it with Netherlands and Germany as well. So that was the main thing. And that got some attention. Mm-hmm.
Excellent. We love to hear all of that. So as you know, I get hammered quite often by the media about talking about cables and interconnectors.
Join the club.
You do too, I know. So I've come up with a plan, right? We're not going to call them utenlandskabler anymore. We're going to call them utvekslingskabler. Because I think we have a problem with public perception, do we not? Public perception in some quarters in Norway is that this is basically the UK stealing Norwegian electrons, selling off family silver, causing shortages, high prices. How do we make that gap between what you've just talked about as obviously in the long-term interest? How do we make that gap to convince people that this is not a problem for the short term for Norway?
Well, I think we have to start with having a dialogue. We are ourselves part of an industry that's been home alone for a while. And there's a public out there in Norway used to energy is for free. So to have the dialogue about what the green transition actually is and what it takes is number one. And then there's one triangle that I like to talk about, and that's if we would like green industrialization replacing the oil and gas industry into the future, we have to have power generation as the second corner in a triangle, and we have to have a grid. So industrialization, power generation, and a grid. If you take out one of those from the equation, the others will not happen. So we have to have a balanced discussion on this into the future. Then our energy system is based on exchange, imports and exports. And the reason we do that is that helps us or serves us well in order for not to over-investing and exploiting the nature too much through our hydropower investments and buildings. If we were to invest ourselves into becoming an island without having exchange, like for instance Iceland, we would have to double, triple, quadruple our investments. That would be much more expensive for the Norwegian people. And so the whole concept of exchange is extremely important. Whether we're in a situation like now where we really rely on the imports, whether we're developing this into a bigger, more renewable energy system, we need the exchange in order to have the flexibility in a weather-based system. So into the future, there will only be need for more exchange, import and export.
Excellent. One final question, because we're at a UK-Norway event. Statnett formed a pretty unique working relationship with National Grid Ventures to develop the North Sea Link Utvecklingskabel. So how do you see, I mean, do you think that the UK and the Norway have the same idea as the development of grids in the North Sea? Do we understand the same things? Do we have the same ambitions on a networked grid? And does that compare to what some of the other neighbouring countries are actually talking about in practice?
The overall very simple answer to that is yes. And then again, UK is mature compared to what we are in developing, for instance, offshore wind. And we can learn from UK. But the relationship we established between Norway, or between Statnett and, for instance, National Grid, and the dialogue that we have operationally today is very good. Then, of course, we have some discussions over the following need for balanced exchange. It's not like we can overinvest the capacity on our side and there is some underinvestments on the other side. And that goes for UK, that goes from Germany, that goes for Denmark and Sweden. And, you know, we have some discussions with our partners that this needs to be symmetric, this needs to be balanced. And we have a strongly invested grid on our side that is ready to do the export. But we will not utilize all of that unless we see a balance on the other side. So we can have some operational discussions that are interesting as well.
Thank you so much for your time. You're in huge demand today for good reason. And thank you so much to our fantastic panel from earlier and to Håkon, where's he gone? He's already at the bar, for moderating. What we've tried to show you is that the UK and Norway are both extremely ambitious about the future. We have some incredible pressing imperatives to fix energy, both in the short term and in the long term with the growth in demand. Really, there are Norwegian companies that have been operating in the UK for a long time who know how to do this. British companies, and we've got some of them upstairs, and I hope you talk to them, because they are keen to show you what they can offer in the build-out of Norwegian offshore wind. And finally, we've heard from Hilda about how we make maximum effective and efficient use of all of that power that we're going to be generating in the future from network grids. So thank you very much to all of you for coming along, and please do stay around for a drink and to chat to some of our participants. Thanks so much.